Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. In this edition, Zimbabwe facing up to its violent past. Our reporters have been talking to the survivors of one of the country's most violent periods, a time when former President Robert Mugabe's forces brutally attacked fellow citizens. A mass slaughter took place in Matabeleland. It's a region in the south and west of Zimbabwe. Today, the memory of that time is still all too vivid in the minds of the eyewitnesses, its legacy ever present in popular songs, even theatre. And at the heart of the matter politically was a catastrophic falling out between Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo, an erstwhile ally, and as ever in history and even the present day. When the leaders fall out, it's the people who suffer. Caroline de Mae and Stephen Carstens, their report, Zimbabwe, a legacy of blood.
Civil war has returned to Zimbabwe, but this time to its theatres. The dark years that followed independence are no longer taboo.
I killed your fathers and brothers, raped your mothers and sisters. Where are my children?
It's alleged that between 1983 and 1985, Robert Mugabe's troops were responsible for large-scale massacres in the south of the country. This theatre piece was once banned, but now returns to the stage. People in Zimbabwe are starting to talk as the ghosts of the 1980s resurface. It is a special day for the Nyati family. They are to be reunited with the body of their deceased father, Julius, killed in 1984. The three sons have come to hear what the forensic investigation has to reveal. Mother and daughter have also travelled from far away, thanks to Shari Eppel, whose association managed to locate and exhume Julius's body.
So I'm now looking at the human remains and I'm thinking, what can your father say? Even though he's dead all these years, what can your father still say, about what happened to him on the day that he died? And we did find some injuries on these bones.
Trained by Argentinian forensic anthropologists, Sherry has become an expert. Working on Julius's remains, she found several broken teeth. His ribs also bear the signs of trauma just before death. She also established that both his arms were broken in the same place. Her observations confirm what Julius's young son had witnessed. Moffat was 10 when his father was taken away by soldiers.
And what we're seeing from these remains, which is only a fraction of the injuries which he suffered, but it's enough to show us this man had a severe beating at the time of his death.
Family members have been invited to identify the clothes the body was found in.
During that time, I was working for Wildlife. We used to be given our uniforms. So I had a lot of these jerseys.
This would have been dragging on the ground when he walked.
Examining the clothes reveals new details. The trousers bear obvious scorch marks. Burning with plastic was a common torture during those years in Zimbabwe.
Proof of burning with plastic. These trousers vindicate, what we were told, by Moffat, who saw it, that this man was burnt deliberately, in the hours of his death. That this is what happened to your father.
It really hurts. It really hurts because, it's like somebody has already killed you.
The memories are fresh for Chris. 34 years ago, soldiers invaded his village. It was part of the operation called Kokura, the Shona name for the storm that will wash away all mess. Rivalry between Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo led to bloodshed. Nkomo's ethnic group, the Ndabeles, was systematically targeted. Trained by the North Koreans, the 5th Brigade was on the lookout for dissidents, but instead attacked civilians. Among the victims, Chris's father, Julius, who had been a farmer. His children are looking at a photo of him for the very first time.
I can say he's my father.
It's my first time to.
This is also the very first time that they see his death certificate. The official cause of death, headache. In all these years, the mother has not said a word to her family, but she saw it all. And she was herself tortured to the extent that she spent 8 months in hospital before she could walk again.
It's very difficult, but sometimes people are overwhelmed with fear and then they think the monster is still alive. And you can't talk of killing the monster that is in a position to kill you instead, because it's still powerful, it's still there.
Power has never really changed hands since the 1980s in Zimbabwe. President Mnangagwa was the state security minister at the time. He was working closely with General Shiri, who was in charge of the notorious 5th Brigade and who is today the land reform minister. Another key figure in the military was today's Vice President Constantine Chiwenga. To close the chapter, Zimbabweans need their leaders to speak out and to apologize. Last January, while trying to entice foreign investors at the Davos summit, Emmerson Mnangagwa was unable to escape questioning.
And how you feel about having been in a position of power when as many as 20,000 people were killed in Matabele land?
I understand that those are the figures that are being flighted, but on the ground, I don't think that is the correct figure being flighted in that area. The most important thing is that what has happened has happened. What can we do about the past? We have put up a commission to deal with that issue. That should not stop us to have a better future.
When he took over from Robert Mugabe late last year, Emmerson Mnangagwa signed the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission bill into law. He then chose a retired judge to head the long-awaited commission.
We, as a commission, have to go to the people, and the people prescribe the medicine. Some people believe that in order to bring closure, there must be an apology. Some people will say no. To bring closure, we must have some reparation. But certainly, the issue of a closure is necessary.
This commission has 10 years to make its recommendations. It involves all stakeholders, including young activists who never experienced the civil war. Activists like Mbuzo, who still feels excluded from a society that is today politically and economically dominated by the Shona majority.
There is a continuation of the genocide, though in a different form. Now the people of Matabeleland are being marginalized. They don't get employment in the civil service. They don't get business loans. So a lot of things, they are excluded. So there are so many things that must be addressed before we get to the reconciliation aspect.
Mbuzo lives in Bulawayo, the heart of Matabeleland. It is here that some brave priests of the Catholic Church raised their voices against the human rights abuses. Shari was among those activists. Together with this lawyer, she collected thousands of testimonies about the deeds of the 5th Brigade in Matabeleland. Their report breaking the silence is still a reference document.
It included very old men, it included old women, numbers of women being put into huts and then being burnt to death. And that wasn't one isolated incident, it was several such incidents, again pointing to something that was systematic.
Size, in one sense, helps establish the intent of the perpetrators, whether the intention was to commit a genocide. But I think perhaps in this instance, more important than the actual number is the proportion of people. You can go the length and breadth of Matabeleland, you will hardly find a single family which wasn't affected in some way by this. And I think that is the critical issue.
The report identifies 3,500 casualties. Others are calculated by extrapolation. The figure of 20,000 is possible. The report also mentions people sent in their thousands to concentration camps. The infamous Balaguer military camp was out of bounds during Mugabe's regime. A former fighter took us to see it.
This point will be like an entry point into the Balaguer camp. What you find inside here are the pieces of asbestos, which I presume was the roof. I was part of the roofing for this structure here. My own assumption is that they were deliberately destroyed.
There are still some traces of human life in this abandoned place, but nothing left standing from the 2,000 barracks that were once here. Hidden among overgrown bushes, these ponds are, however, a fierce reminder of this camp where soldiers were often torturing civilians.
Those who survived have actually told me about it. Victims were being hanged from their legs from this branch with their heads drowning in the water here, tied on with a rope. Then they lower your body into the water. It goes up to as far as that, chokes your nose, your mouth, your ears, your eyes. And when they remove you and say, tell the truth, even if you don't know what it is that they're doing, you'll try to say something.
The place is full of mounds that could be clandestine burial grounds. Communal graves were found not far from here.
Thousands and thousands of people were held here. Most of them would have died here. But the fact that there is no acknowledgement, there's no revelations by the authorities to say, whilst we look at a new dispensation, does the new dispensation disclose what the old order did to our people?
The government does not want to erect a memorial here. In Matabele land, however, time seems to have stopped. People whose daily life has changed little in the past 20 years are prisoners of their horrific past. The Matopos Mountains are full of bones that the spring rains sometimes uncover. With the new government in place, the families of some of the victims have come forward. They want to find the remains of their loved ones. Shari and her association went back to the place where Julius was exhumed. In the Nyati family, Chris is still looking for his cousin.
For me, what's most important is it's a form of reparation and healing for families and communities. And so, our aim is to bring bones out in a way that, in a way which will allow families to have their remains back for decent reburial. But I also think it's fair to say that in any country after civil war and clandestine burials, you never exhume all the dead.
Shari sees every body recovered as a small victory, but Chris could not hide his feelings when he saw the place where his father had been lying for the last 3 decades.
Even up to now, we are still confused. We still want to know, why was he killed? Because there is no history about him. Why were they beating him? What were they beating him for? I want to know. That's why I say I always want justice on this issue. And I cannot retire until I'm being told.
Chris will give his father a dignified burial. In Matabele land, it is believed that ancestors can curse you if you do not treat them well. Chris struggled to raise his 8 brothers and sisters. Now that he has found his father's remains, he hopes for a better life.
Our reporter Caroline de Mae is with us. Caroline, thank you so much for that report and that insight into Zimbabwe today. And I'm wondering, is the fact that this story is now back 30 years later, is it because of the NGOs or activists, or is it a sign that there is a real change in Zimbabwe?
No, there is a change in Zimbabwe, of course. And the fact that Robert Mugabe left power last year, it kind of created a space, really, because he was perceived as the architect of Gukurahundi, of those dark years. And now people feel free to talk. I mean, it's as simple as that. The second thing is this incredible work of these activists for the last 20 years. And, the more bodies that exhume, the more bodies that they have to exhume, because family come forward and they ask for more bodies, they ask for their cousins, they ask for their grandfather, they ask for all those remains to be look for and to bury them. They want to bury them. We went into a lot of villages with Chris. We were actually looking for his extended family, and we happened to meet that old woman. She's 87. She lived those two wars, the Independence Wars and the Gukuraundi Wars, and what she says about those years is extremely sensitive. Just listen to what she has to say.
Forget? No, no, no. I cannot forget. But I can forgive. Why not? As long as they recognize that we are victims. We were women, mothers, grandmothers. The guilty parties must understand. We also lost all of our cows. Ever since then, we've been poor. They have to help us.
Was the first one to be picked from that area, leaving behind Nyati and...
It's really hard to imagine the heartbreak of discovering these things and how this adds to the already open wounds from that period, Caroline, isn't it? And beyond the Ndebele people, who else is questioning what happened under Mugabe's time, under Mugabe's orders?
Well, it's not really part of the political debate here. You know, you can imagine there is still quite a big self-censorship. And if actually President Mnangagwa has to answer a question in Davos, I can assure you that no journalist, no local journalist would dare to ask this question. Interest's sake, one journalist in Bulawayo actually published one of his statements. I think it was just after he took over. And in the statement, he was qualifying, was talking about the Ndebele as cockroaches. Well, that journalist actually lost his job and is now in exile. So that gives you an idea of how touchy that subject still is in Zimbabwe.
Caroline de Mae, thank you very much indeed. Caroline de Mae, this week's reporter, with that insight into Zimbabwe's not so distant past. You can see it, of course, again via our website, France24.com. This is Reporters on France 24. Stay with us.